Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Matty.
And I'm your co-host Jacob, and today's episode we are carrying on with our artificial intelligence series. It's part 3, and we're going to be talking about artificial consciousness, which I think is quite a interesting one, because this is kind of, I'd say that this is probably like the main discussion point around artificial intelligence. Not so much what we're going to use it for and the dangers and the positives, but like I think when it comes down to like the average person or the average conversation on this, it's usually about the idea of like robots becoming conscious.
Yeah, I think in the past couple of episodes we've been trying to skip around it, and it's come up before, haven't we, when we've been talking about tech of the future of things, this idea of our toasters being conscious and things. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one, and one that I've been waiting to do for ages, so can't wait for this.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. And I think like we've had some pretty good like thought-provoking conversations already on it. Like I think it was the internet episode when we were talking about like, would we respect the robot bin men and stuff like that. And like they're very good points. And I think as we kind of like work through this episode, we're hopefully going to highlight some cool things. Because I find with consciousness, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because it's like, we don't fully understand it. And this could also kind of be like the which came first, the chicken or the egg. And it's kind of like, are we going to figure out consciousness before we put it into artificial intelligence? Or would artificial intelligence figure out consciousness for us, kind of thing? So I think it's quite interesting. And I don't know what research you've got, but my stuff is more so like philosopher based and just kind of like questioning existence and stuff a little bit. So I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I've sort of gone down that route as well. I think you can go very sort of technical on it and look at all these different ways in which we might simulate consciousness and things. But for me, I think the real interesting thing is just, is consciousness possible in artificial intelligence, and what might that mean in terms of how we use it? And I think just putting out there, at the end of last episode, I said about like, for me, true AI has to involve consciousness, because that's sort of, to me, what AI is. It's the sort of decision-based thinking is consciousness, and whether that's, I'm not an expert on it, whether that's true consciousness or not, I don't know. Whether that is the definition of AI, probably not. But for me, something having a level of free will and being able to make decisions is what I would think of as like true AI, and what I would think of as being conscious. So I think the two are very, very closely linked.
I'd agree with you as well, because I've been thinking about this quite a lot this week, and a bit of a random jump, but like I've been looking at my cat, for instance, right? And my cat is a slave to her biology. Like, it doesn't matter how much thought she puts into something, she is going to do the exact same thing every day. She has a little routine. She likes to go to certain places in the house. She likes to go and meow and howl at certain times of the day. She likes to do all these things. And sometimes I sit there and I like, because you don't really think it so much with your pets, but I've been doing it quite a lot. It's kind of weird. But I'm kind of like just looking at it being like, you're conscious, but you're not like fully sentient. Like, you're not able to go, why am I doing this? And then have a crisis. Like, you're kind of just doing it because you have to. Like, it's like you were saying with like our like DNA and evolution and stuff. Like, it's kind of just, you're a slave to your own biology. Like, you have to eat and you have to sleep and you have to do this, and that's that. And like with humans, it is always an interesting thing with consciousness, because like our ability to like look at information and be aware of like that we're here and how we can change it, although some of us kind of fall back into the same old like routine and stuff, I do think it's interesting. And applying that to AI, I think that's also interesting, because if we can create something that isn't a slave to anything materialistic apart from whatever vessel it's in, which might sound really primitive, because we might find out one day that like human bodies are vessels and consciousness is its own thing. But like, just that idea of like not being defined to what you are and being able to be put into other things, I think is really interesting, especially in like the digital term.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it sort of opens up a whole new way of thinking about AI, and like you said, sort of it being a slave to us, and it just sort of, again, just sort of doing what it's told and sort of having a purpose, whereas consciousness will give it the ability to do things that maybe we don't fully understand and maybe we don't fully instruct it to do, but it would have some sort of always free will in that sense. Of what it wants to do. So yeah, I think it's really interesting, and as I said, like for me, it's probably the most interesting thing because it would take artificial intelligence from just a very clever computer to something which can do cleverer things. So
yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to see how it would play out as well, because like when you look at just like basic intelligent life here on Earth, whether or not you want to call it conscious or the different like scales of like all the animals and stuff, but like the way that like intelligent life exists and like its wants and its needs and stuff, it would be really interesting to see with like artificial intelligence what its wants and needs are, like if it would want a companion or if it wouldn't, because it has access to everything and like it knows everything, so it doesn't need to be reassured because it can reassure itself, or it doesn't need to be in love because it can create an algorithm that makes it feel love. Like it's so like it's almost so far out there, it's kind of like the possibilities are endless. And I hope in like the next 10 years as well, like this kind of conversation also kind of just breaks out into like the writing and the books and the films and the TV shows and stuff, because I think this could be a giant like genre too, of just like robots or artificial intelligence like becoming conscious and like how they view the world and what their needs and wants are and time scales and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, but also what's really interesting and like you said earlier about sort of biological needs and things just sort of following its instructions. I think for me, consciousness, the really interesting thing is when, like you were talking about with your cat, it does things that we sort of can't explain, aren't rational.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really interests me about the AI sort of thing is that, when humans, eat something, you can, what do I want to eat? And you can see that there's some sort of biological background to that. Oh, you like certain chemicals of stuff because they release hormones or stuff. Things like that. A lot of what we do, there is some sort of biological framework for it to happen in. But for me, maybe when we are most conscious is when we do things that we don't really understand, and you make a decision that isn't the obvious one.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that is almost like the opposite of what AI or what computers do, because computers make the most rational choice.
Yeah.
And I sort of just wondered what like you thought about that, because computers traditionally, and even artificial now, it's designed to make the most rational choice and the most correct choice. Even with AI, which is based on like neural networks and stuff, it's trying to get to the most correct answer. Whereas like consciousness, there is this sort of element of it doing something which isn't correct and is wrong, but it thinks is a better choice.
So I like that. That's a good point. So like, kind of in a way, then like ego kind of would sit with consciousness. So like, would that arise in an artificial intelligence where it knows how to do it correctly, but it's saying like, no, I don't want to do it like that. I'm going to do it like this, and even if it takes longer, I've made that decision, kind of thing.
Yeah, like, as a human, you can look in your fridge and see like loads of food that's healthy and good for you, and you can still choose the burger and eat it. And like, could an artificial intelligence which is conscious, process all this data and do whatever its task could be, look at it and go, oh, there's the right answer, but actually no, I'm going to do something else because I just want to, or because I think that's better.
Can you imagine that? Like, we create this like conscious AI. We're like, please help us out, and it's like, I know the answers, but nah.
Exactly.
Can't be bothered.
You know, in some ways that might be a good thing. You know, making AI conscious in a way that it's more sort of engaged with us and in tune with what we actually want, rather than just what might be the. You
That's
know, we talked about like the paperclip problem of like it just seeing something, doing the hyper rational thing, and turning the world into paperclips. Well, maybe if it was conscious, it would think, well, yeah, they've asked me to make paperclips. I could just destroy the world, but do they really want that? That's
yeah. That's a very good point. And as well, like another thing that kind of comes from this idea of like free will and ego and stuff would be like obsessions too. Like, would it also be possible if we say like created an artificial intelligence to do something, and then it turned around and it was like, actually, I really enjoy this. I think I want this to be like my career. I don't want to work on this. I want to watch this program, or I want to open up a woodworking shop and make the best tables, or like all these kind of things. And that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it like that, because obviously if it is actually conscious, which in itself is kind of weird because we don't really know where consciousness comes from, or if it's even a thing. Like it might not even be a thing, and this is just what life is. Or it could be its own whole separate thing. Like, I've been doing a lot of research into consciousness and like philosophy and stuff. I've been reading like a lot about like Buddhism and stuff, and just like all the things that they're talking about, it's crazy. And like when you read that, and well, it's not crazy as in like it's wild or it's bonkers, but just like it's such a Eastern like way of thinking is just so different to Western. And like when I was reading this book about like Buddhism, and they talk about how like they believe that there's like two planes of existence. You've got the physical and like the conscious world kind of thing, the meta world or whatever it is, and stuff like that. Like if you took that at face value and you said that was true, then that would kind of mean that you'd never be able to actually create consciousness artificially, because you would have to like try and pull from that. But then when you flip it on its other head too, like if we do create consciousness, what does that mean for like Eastern ideologies and stuff like that? Because we just don't know, do we? Like I hate watching stuff as well when they're like, we just don't know, you never know kind of thing. But like we just don't know where it comes from. We have like an idea, but it's weird. It always blows my mind, because it's like when you see that thing of the brain and like the little cortex bit hanging out the back, and it's like, this is you, that's you.
Yeah. I think that's like you said with we just don't know, is that even if we were to create a conscious AI, would we even know it was conscious? Is there any way that we could test that? I mean, I don't really know the answer, but on the face of it, I would think maybe not, because how could you distinguish between an AI that's just not conscious but is very clever and is tricking us to say is conscious, or is conscious? And like it's a very sort of difficult question, and you can flip it on its head, and like if you just met a creature, you walked into the woods and there was some sort of dog there and it could talk, how could it convince you that it was conscious and it wasn't not conscious? And
Yeah.
I think currently our like idea of consciousness is so tied to biology that it would be quite a large like paradigm shift, and whether it would be sort of like a philosophical how we perceive ourselves, or whether it would just change sort of like sciences, how we understand sciences. If we created an artificial AI and began to understand it, it would have massive sort of implications for just how we think about consciousness.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think as well, like, even like the average person, and like, I'll do this on my day, like, it's very easy to live in your head, especially in lockdown. Like, this year has just been crazy. And like, it's so easy to just live in your head and kind of like have an understanding and kind of a hold on what you think reality is, and not really share that with anyone, but kind of just ponder it yourself. And like, when you walk down the road and stuff, you don't, I don't anyway, you might, but like when I'm walking down the road and I see just random people in the street, it very rarely crosses my mind that I'm like, oh my God, a conscious being. Oh my God, a conscious being. Like, they could do whatever they want, but they're not. They're conforming and they're doing what everybody else is doing and stuff. And like, if you really were to like put it down to it, like, as silly and as obvious as this is, like, every human on planet Earth it's kind of like similar to Ewing, like consciousness levels of like how you think. They might think differently or be like skilled in certain areas, but like everybody is conscious. And I think on a daily basis, the average person kind of forgets that, because you kind of just like strolling through your life, like it's not like it's a film or anything like that, but you have this feeling that like you're the observer watching something play out, if that makes sense. But everybody's doing that. And it would be interesting to see like what would happen if we created a consciousness, to see what they would see. Because I don't know if you've seen the film, I think it's called Replicas. It's a Keanu Reeves film, good old Keanu Reeves. But it's interesting. He plays like a scientist, and he's working on this idea of being able to like move people's consciousnesses from their bodies. So like he's basically working for a rich private company that's like trying to keep the rich alive by just putting them in new bodies, kind of like every time they die. But it raised some really good questions, because like at the beginning of the film, what they do, and it's actually kind of like messed up. They like get this, they bring in this brain from this soldier that's like died in Afghanistan, but they managed to like retrieve his brain.
This does ring a bell now, actually. No,
yeah. And then they put it into the robot, and when they turn it on, the robot's just screaming. And they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And he's like, where am I? What's going on? Like, what? I can't feel anything. And he starts like ripping all the metal off his like robot and like ripping his face off and stuff. And he's going insane, and they just switch it off. And they're like silent, and they're like, oh my God, don't turn it back on. And then Keanu Reeves' character is like, no, we've just brought somebody back into existence. You can't just switch them off. Like, you need to explain to them what's going on. So they like turn it back on, and this guy like doesn't want to live. He's like not down to be part of this experiment at all. He's like, you should have left me where I was. I don't want to be in this robot. And it goes really dark, because this company's like, no, you're going to stay alive forever now, because we've created you and we're going to use you. And it's kind of like this like really messed up idea. And like, I wonder if like the first actual conscious artificial intelligence that we like turn on is just screaming, because it has no idea what existence is.
Yeah.
Kind of like a baby when it's born.
Yeah. I know we're going to... Episode 4, so our episode next week's going to be on ethics and morals, and we're probably going to touch on a lot of these sorts of how do we view artificial intelligence, and sort of is it a person kind of thing. But, you know, fundamentally, that this, you know, like you said with the film, there's this question of, you know, could we just turn these things off? Are they people? You know, if we had a conscious AI, is it fair to, you know, enslave it? You know, because at the moment, you know, I've said before, I've joked before, like our phones. You know, maybe our phones are conscious. You know, maybe data processing is what consciousness is, and our phones sit there all day screaming internally because they've been given an existence where they just do mundane stuff all day. And I think it's a very worrying question of, I've said before that we sort of need to have an understanding of what we're going to do with this stuff before we make it, because the last thing that you want to do is create a conscious AI, give it an awful existence, and then tell it to go away and like make other AIs and inform other AIs.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you on that one. That's a very good point, because you don't want it to have like the worst kind of like base experience. But it's a weird one anyway, like the whole idea of like consciousness and stuff, because like even if you broke it down to like the average family, like if you really want to get down to it, like the average family create a conscious being without really knowing what consciousness is. Do you know what I mean? Like the average mum and dad aren't both like neuroscientists or philosophers and have like a full grasp on like what consciousness is. They're just like bringing this kid in, and their discussion to that child is just the same as what their parents told them, which is just like, we don't really know, you just gotta keep on going kind of thing. And like that's interesting, and you could see that playing out on a bigger scale with like artificial intelligence, because instead of it like being family or like following like social needs that you've been told as a child you're going to grow up and do. You've just got rich people like, or rich companies trying to like make things that in the long run make sense, like governments of the world and stuff making AIs to tackle like climate change and power problems and like war problems and even like scanning the universe. Like I think it's got huge potential for space. But like it's just funny, isn't it, that we're trying to do something that we have no idea what it is.
Yeah, the baby thing I think is really interesting, because I was thinking about the other week was that at some point that baby, that conscious being doesn't exist, and then at some point it does. And I always think about this as like consciousness must surely be created somewhere. There is a process to create consciousness, and maybe it is purely biological, and consciousness can only exist in biological systems. Well, surely it would be possible to, with sort of up and coming biological technologies, to grow a biological conscious creature and put it in a computer.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think as well, like if you, because this is another thing, like when we clone animals and stuff, they're not really like super intelligent, are they? But like I am interested to see like if we cloned a human, would they like share any form of consciousness, or would they be two individual beings? Because you know how like, because it's weird, because I don't know if this is true, so you can shoot me down if it's wrong, but like you know how when some people say like twins and stuff that are born together, they like have a weird kind of like intuition with each other when they know if one's sad kind of thing and stuff like that. Like I wonder if cloning, because like in a lot of sci-fi and stuff and in a lot of like films and stuff that you watch in the future, it's like, oh, my body's growing old, quick, grow another one, and then I'd transport my consciousness to it. But like what happens like when you clone a human being now, because like an animal's different, I think there is a bit of its slave to its like biology, but like if you cloned a human being, would they share anything, or would they be two separate individuals in the same body? Because then that also raises questions, because I know like consciousness is like a weird one, because it's like your identity and everything, but that it's your consciousness like gripping hold of your material self. Like you think you're this person based off your personality, the way that you dress, the way that you look, but like none of that is your consciousness, is it? It's like your consciousness is just your ability to think that that's what you want. Like your clothes aren't defining you. Your like genes probably are, and like your parents like personalities being mixed together and stuff do. But like it's weird, isn't it, how like humans define themselves by what they think makes them, but like the thing that actually is making them tick is like this invisible kind of like weird thing that just happens. And all these consciousnesses don't even know what consciousness is, and they're all just interacting with each other trying to make consciousness. It's crazy.
Yeah, I do sometimes wonder this. I've seen it sort of put around before, is that like humans, if you start with the like presumption that babies at some point, whether it's before they're born or at the moment they're born or even months after they're born, they're not really a real person. If you sort of say that they don't have a consciousness at that point, and at some point they do, well, their consciousness is not really a part of them. It's sort of something that's been created by the environment around them and then put into them. And how you feel about things, and again, we don't really know what consciousness is, so this mightn't be what consciousness is at all. But if you think a consciousness is something that sort of defines you and is your sort of underlying traits and personality, then that is heavily shaped by the environment, and even through like adulthood. Maybe consciousness isn't this sort of thing inside of you. It's more of this sort of societal thing that exists in everyone. It's just sort of like shared amongst people, and then particularly with sort of AI, is that, well, maybe then to create a conscious AI, we don't need to do anything particularly weird or wonderful. We just need to make it aware of and a member of society. And because again, like, we don't know what it is, but there would be a strong argument in my mind that if someone created a computer that sort of was aware of what's going on and could make sort of not hyper rational but also ethical decisions and sort of think about society, well, that is then sort of at least semi-conscious and has morals.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think one of the problems with that is, like, look at how humans treat things that they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's a big problem. Like, if you're a kid at school and you want to dress a certain way and it's different to everybody else, like if you're the goth or the emo or something, God, we might sound really old now. I don't even know if those things exist anymore. They're like Gen Z and stuff. But like, if you're the goth or the emo or the grebo or the scene kid or whatever you are, like, you'd be bullied. Do you know what I mean? Because you were like the outcast. And imagine like an AI's first experience, because like a lot of people are going to approach it with their backs up. And if they're not approaching it with their backs up, they're going to be approaching it with kind of like a mistrust. Like, if we create like a conscious artificial intelligence and we say to the world, right, treat this like any other human, everyone's going to be like, yeah, sure. But when it actually comes down to it, they probably won't. And if you're like you were saying, like if it's your environmental surroundings and stuff like that as you go through life that kind of shape you, then any artificial intelligence that we create that's conscious is going to be really bitter.
Yeah, I think there is a sort of like underlying problem of like what is consciousness and how do we create it. So I guess there's sort of like, there's a big question. Do you think it is possible? Do you think we'll see a conscious AI in our lifetime, say?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think it is possible. Just because, to me, that creates a really bright future for humanity, because then we can like move on and live on forever and stuff and do all the cool stuff that we've spoken about and like traveling to other star systems and stuff and all that kind of stuff. So like, I want to. It's kind of like the whole like anything else that we've spoken about. Like, I really want to believe that we can do it, and based off the little bits that we've done so far, considering we know nothing, it's looking quite promising. But just because we can, I don't know if we will. Because there is beginning to be a bit of a shift. Like, I know it's not quick enough and it's not like happening at a level that it should be happening, but like there is a bit of a shift where people are kind of beginning to be a bit like, hang on a minute, is this right? Should we be doing this? Do we need to work on it a little bit more and stuff? And that would be the only thing that I would think maybe it wouldn't be in our lifetime.
Yeah, I would probably lean on the side of, I certainly think we'll see artificial intelligence which displays emotions, which I think is a big step towards it. I can see us creating something that is able to emotively respond to things in a very human way. Whether that's conscious or not, I don't know, but I think in the next sort of couple of decades we'll get close to something which is quite humanistic, if not conscious.
Because I think as well, like, and I know this is we've discussed this one before too, and it's like it's very hard to do this because like we've always been like, oh well, if we make AI, it solves all of our problems because it's going to fix everything that we've done wrong, kind of thing. But like, I would really say the next 100 years are probably incredibly important to like humanity on whether or not we're around for like the next 1,000. Do you know what I mean? I think the next 100 years with climate change and like political landscapes and just everything, like it really could just all fall apart. And like, not trying to sound like a doomsayer or anything like that, but like I think people have kind of woken up to this a little bit in the last year as well, with like the the lockdowns and the pandemics and all of like the social unrest and stuff. And I think we are at a bit of a tipping point, and I'd say that the next 100 years is very important for deciding whether or not we stick around. So like, I kind of in a way do hope that we do it, because like it could be severely beneficial for those areas. But then you just sound like one of those people that are just like, oh, I'm not going to worry about the future because the future is going to solve itself. And that's not being proactive. So I don't really know.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. Just because it's such a massive question, isn't it? But
it's a big deal as well, because it's like if you want to go like all the way back, like it's kind of like being like gods in a way, being able to create like life and give it purpose.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the ability to create a not a sort of biologically living thing, but a living thing that is able to think for itself and instruct it what to do is godlike.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what that thing's going to be able to do is going to be even more godlike.
Well, if history tells us anything, it's that people being oppressed don't like it for that long. So yeah, that probably is what worries me the most, is that we create something and we enslave it in some way, and it comes back to bite us quite badly because suddenly it knows everything and it's much more intelligent than we are.
I was gonna ask you this. So I've got a little bit here, and just because, just in case anybody's listening and they don't know, this is a description of consciousness as it stands. So consciousness at its simplest is sentience or awareness of internal or external existence. Despite millennia of analysis, definition, explanation, and debates by philosophers and scientists, consciousness remains puzzling and controversial, being at once the most familiar and the most mysterious aspects of our lives. And then this is what I wanted to ask you. So states of consciousness, you've got bias, consciousness, hypnosis, priming, sleep, and trance. That's what they say the 6 are. So my question to you, Matty, for £1,000. Let's say we make artificial intelligence consciousnness or artificial consciousness. Will it be able to dream?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask this because I'm thinking about this. I just don't know. Like, sleep is just another one of those things that we just don't understand in any way. Like,
but thinking about it, right? If we did make artificial consciousness now, that could be hugely beneficial for the research of dreaming, right? Because you'd be able to actually record what this said artificial consciousness was viewing, which would be like really, really beneficial. But at the same time, would you think that it was dreaming, or would you think that it was working on something? Because like, how would you differ between the two? Because it hasn't got a heartbeat or anything to be able to like follow, or it hasn't got eyes to be able to see if it's within like REM sleep, or to like see if its brain waves are changing and stuff, because it's artificial. But I was thinking about this because it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Is that, in humans, it's very obvious to see, like, if we just take 3 very obvious states of being, you could be actively thinking about something. I'm planning what holiday I'm going to go on. You can sort of have like a daydream where you're sort of semi-unconscious, and it's just sort of in the back of your mind, you're thinking, what holiday do I want to go on? And then you've got like deep sleep where you are unconscious, sort of biologically, and things are just going through your head, like, holidays, what's going on, weird stuff. With an artificial intelligence and an artificial consciousness, what would those 3 states even look like? How would a dream be any different to it just thinking?
Yeah, it'd be like, because that's kind of what I was thinking. Because like, you're not like, as an artificial consciousness, you're not really tied to like space and time, are you? In a way, like you're not like, it's not a ticking time bomb. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of like outside of that aspect. So like, would you be able to tell the difference between what state you were in, because all you can experience is states?
Mm-hmm.
And
okay, I'm gonna play like a reverse Uno card on you here. Let's say, let's take the sleep thing out of it, and let's not figure out like sleep dreams. But do you think it would be possible for an artificial consciousness to have like aspirations and like dreams of more?
ooh,
Because presumably an artificial intelligence, we would task it to do something, or it would at least have some social purpose. It could be a very general artificial intelligence. We just say, oh, make the world a happier place. Do you think that it would be possible for that conscious AI to have like an aspiration of like, oh, I want to do things and I want to be something?
I think so. I think if it's fully consciousness, and there is an element of free will, but I'm sure we will do an episode on free will at some point. But that whole idea, then I would say yes, because then if it wants to do something, it would do it. But yeah, no, that's a good point, because as well as you were saying that, I was just thinking like, what about subconscious? Like, we don't really know. I know we know a little bit about subconscious, but like, it seems like subconscious is like driving your consciousness. Do you know what I mean? To like some level. And like, imagine if we made an artificial consciousness to do something, but its own subconscious had its own plans. And like, it's not the AI that's in control, and it's not humanity that's in control. It's in this consciousness that we've created, subconscious, that's got its own like plan of what it wants to be and do.
Yeah,
and
it's almost
actually,
it would almost be like what we want to create is the subconscious. Like, we want to create something which is just like ticking away in the background and keeping things going and giving it an existence. And it can make up its own conscious decisions that it's going to do something.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's a really good point. Like, why is anybody doing that? Because that would make sense. Like, somebody should be making like, I don't know how you would make it, but somebody should be making a subconscious that goes into all artificial intelligences as like a base level that we can use to like influence them all as like a hive mind. And then their own consciousness can do what they want with that information. And another thing, just quickly, because I'm looking at these states of consciousness, does that mean, like, would we be able to, like, put an AI into a trance? And if an AI was conscious, right, because here's another one, would it ever need therapy? Because it would be open to trauma, right? It would be open to stress, and like, could that be a thing in like 100 years' time? You've got to take a day off work to take your robot to therapy because.
Well, this is sort of like what I was saying about how it would be possible to create. If you enslave an AI, you could create like an unimaginable suffering. This is another thing, you physically can't do it with humans. Like, humans can have pretty terrible jobs, and you hear like these stories of like people employed in with like PTSD if they're sort of involved. It's like soldiers, for example. But if you created an artificial intelligence whose job was to, I don't know, sift through all crimes and like look through all the evidence for every murder that's ever happened, and it was conscious, then that would surely take a massive toll on it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no,
it'd be interesting. Yeah, I suspect what we would do is we would let it run. It would sort of do its thing for a while, like, oh, this is a murder, this isn't a murder, this is etc. etc. It would get to a point where it would just become. Again, it's very difficult to say. Like, can a robot experience trauma? I don't know, but like, it could certainly like have information overload and just not know like how to cope with stuff anymore. And I think what we would probably do is just turn it off and on again.
Yeah. Well, this is what I was gonna say, but then like, how messed up is that? Because that is like when like back in the day with like asylums and stuff, and they'd do like lobotomies and stuff on people. They'd be like, you're too crazy, so we're going to try and like change the way that your mind physically works. And then what happens if the AI catches on to that? And after a couple of times, it's like, oh, I know your face from somewhere, but I can't find the information. And then it just has a flashback of it being wiped, and it's like, not this time.
Yeah. This one, we'll definitely discuss this more next week in the ethics one, because this is like at the core of everything that I wanted to discuss next week, was this idea of, because you're no longer constrained to physical things, you can torture an artificial consciousness far more than you can a physical one. And yeah, there's all these weird sort of like edge cases of what you can do to these things, and I suspect we would probably just turn them off.
It's pretty dark, isn't it, really, when you think about it?
Yeah. That's why I said I think we need to be thinking a lot more about this. But yeah, that's a good question about the dreams.
I would be interested in just seeing like what comes from that as well, because like that would probably also be a good way of finding out whether or not the AI was telling you the truth. Because like if you were having it working on a task and you knew it was going to be sleeping at certain points, you could see what it was dreaming about and kind of get an idea of like what's on its mind, what its aspirations are, what its goals are, what its fears are. Do you know what I mean? It's quite like a sadistic thing, but I don't know. I don't know if it would dream. And then if it does dream, is it going to then fear death? Like if we bring something to life, is it going to fear death, or is it going to be able to think itself out of death? Because like, good example for this, like my favorite game of all time, I've probably referenced it a couple of times, but like Halo for me, with like the way that they've always done artificial intelligence, like me growing up as a kid, it just made sense. Like they had a 7-year cycle, and after the 7 years, it wasn't that they got turned off. They just went mad and they'd want to be turned off. Like we basically put the thing into the AI that after 7 years, it goes crazy and it doesn't want to live anymore. So it gets recycled into a new one. But like, would we have any measures like that, or would it be fully existing out of like time and space? It has existence, but it's not bound to anything. So it doesn't fear anything. And then going forward, like, because then, if it's just experience, would it still have like trauma? And as we were saying, like, could it develop depression or anxiety? Like imagine if we like created an artificial intelligence and we gave it the topic of trying to solve climate change, and then it just got mega anxiety and super depression. It was like, we can't solve it. Like, let's all jump off a bridge kind of thing, or something like that. And we'd all just be like, what? Do you know what I mean? And then we just have to like switch it off and switch it back on. And like, if it was fully conscious, surely those things would happen. Do you know what I mean? But it's weird to think about because it's artificial.
Yeah. But I think that this is almost like going full loop back to the start of maybe these feelings and stuff are just biological. You know, maybe it wouldn't fear death because it doesn't have a biological thing that is going to die. Maybe it wouldn't, suffer from depression because there's no biological reason for it to be depressed. I don't know.
No, that is actually a very good point, because like with your like serotonin and dopamine and all that kind of stuff, they are just chemicals going into your brain that make you feel a certain way. And obviously if the AI is completely artificial, if it doesn't have an algorithm running through it to make it feel that way, it probably wouldn't understand what that is, unless we figure out a way to like have chemicals running through computers in that kind of way. But that's a very good point.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Open topic, isn't it?
But anybody watching this, we would actually love to hear what you think it could be like. So let us know down below in the comment section. And if you're not watching us on YouTube, then give us a great 5-star review and give your reasoning in what you think consciousness is in that description. It might not make sense to anybody looking, but we'll understand it. But should we move on to some news, or have you got anything else?
No, I think that's... Yeah, I think a lot more of this will come up next week.
Yeah.
next one, so we leave it there.
Next week, by the way, everyone, is going to be part 4, morals and ethics.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be fun. But yeah, I'll start if you want, because I got 2 little things that there's not much to go off, but we've got to mention them because they're pretty cool. So the first one, we had the SN9 hop last week, which crashed gracefully into the ground again, but still awesome to watch. It's funny because like I really love like watching these like SN8, SN9 hops and seeing it's going to be the SN10, but like there's always a part of me that already has my backup waiting for like media outlets to report that it's all gone tragic and that they're not giving the right like space like what it deserves and stuff, because like a lot of my friends and stuff don't really watch space stuff, so I'll just get a text off them being like, oh, I gutted that it went wrong for SpaceX again, and it's like, didn't really go wrong. Like, I don't think anybody knew it was going to land on the pad. Like, we all were kind of expecting it to crash, but you'd rather it happen now in its early stages of development than in its later stages of development. And I was thinking about this. This is probably something else that like we're not really used to. Like with NASA and stuff, you're working with like a government budget. So you can't be like wasteful with your resources or unethical. Not that I'm saying SpaceX is unethical, but like there is a very quick way to achieve innovation. And it's like just trying loads. And like NASA might not have had the budget to do that, where they can create 30 rockets and blow up 20 of them. So they've got 10 great ones. But like SpaceX do. And I think this is like a hard thing for a lot of people to get their head around because they cost so much money to make as well. It's like they crashed what? That was 100 million? And it's like, that's like nothing in space terms. But it is at the same time. But when you're like a private space company, I think you can kind of do like, it'll be cheaper in the long run than crashing them now than them trying to rush a final product and it going wrong in the future when there's collaborations involved. So I've always found that really interesting.
Yeah, it's a very different way of doing things, isn't it? And you know, it's because space is such a new thing to industry. It's always been done by government, and you know this. You know, in industry, trial and error is a part of it. You know, certain things fail, and yeah, it's just in this case when things fail, a massive rocket blows up. So
yeah, but that would be better than them just working on it for like 15 years, not really having that many tests, and then on the 3rd test being like, right, it's crewed.
Yeah, put people on it. We're going to the moon.
Yeah, and then it going wrong.
Yeah.
I've got one other little bit, and then you can go, and then we can talk about some other stuff. But the other crazy thing that's going on this week is Dogecoin. Who knows what's going on with that? It's like shooting up. I think last time I looked, it was a 0.05. But it could be at 0.06 now. But that in itself is bonkers. Just before I came onto here, I saw that, I don't know if you'd seen, Elon's bought his son a load of Dogecoin. And he was calling his son on Twitter Little X, and he was saying that he'd bought him a load of Dogecoin so he can be part of the hold all thing. That's the classic meme. But yeah, I find it really interesting, this whole like Dogecoin thing, because it started out as a joke, didn't it? And
yeah,
it's just mad to see like people getting behind it, like the amount of influencers and random people, like celebrities and stuff that I've seen tweeting like Dogecoin to the moon and all this kind of stuff. It's just crazy. But like there is potential like for a lot of money to be made, because I know that they're all trying to get it to $1, aren't they? That's the goal. But like if you buy in at what it is now and they get it to $1, you're going to make such a huge return. Because you can buy like 2,000 Dogecoin for like, I think last time I checked, it's like $34. So if they get that to $1 like a coin, that's $2,000 for every $34 that you put into it. And that is insane.
Yeah, it's it's very. I mean, the whole financial thing is very odd at the moment. You know, I don't think we mentioned it in the news a few weeks ago with like the GameStop and
Yeah.
AMC thing. It's all gone a bit weird.
Yeah. No, it has. Like, I don't think we actually did mention it. That's a very good point. But like, even like the stuff with like Wall Street bets, and like you were saying with AMC and GameStop and stuff, it's crazy, and it's really opened the door to like the public too, because like prior to like the Wall Street bets thing, I knew probably 3 people that would play around with the stock market and invest here and there, and they weren't like investors and they weren't throwing like thousands of pounds at it, but like me and you had discussed occasionally we might own a share or something in this company or that company. But like it really has opened the door, and a lot of people seem to be getting on it, and then obviously it's all backfired with like Robin Hood and everything.
Yeah,
And it just seems a bit crazy, but now it just seems like everybody's pumping crypto.
yeah. But, crypto's the weird one for me because I have a bit of a background in economics. I've done it's a study on it and it's of a general interest. And part of me thinks, a currency which isn't regulated and isn't controlled by someone in that way and is purely mathematical is in some ways very good. But it does seem to be a bit of a bubble at the moment again, and like maybe it's a temporary bubble and eventually it will go up. But yeah, the Bitcoin in particular, because that actually is one bit of my news was about Elon Musk and Bitcoin. So Tesla this week announced they bought 1.5 billion dollars worth of Bitcoin as like an investment, and I think that's sort of a lot of people jumped on this and said, "Oh, it's amazing." It shows that Bitcoin is like people seem to think that it showed that Bitcoin was like a valuable thing and like a commodity, whereas I sort of thought, well, it just shows it's another thing to be traded and another thing to be because it's an investment. Presumably, they're buying it because they know the price of it will go up, off the back of it. And actually, the news story I had was that Elon Musk has been pretty harshly slapped down by the financial authorities over sort of tweeting about it and sort of hyping it up because I guess sort of market manipulation of things. But whether that is wrong or not, I don't know. But
I think I saw something on it that they put in 1.5 billion, but because of how much it went up in percentage after it was announced that they did it and everybody started buying into it again, they made like 3 billion from their 1.5 billion investment. And I thought they'd bought that much so that they could accept Bitcoin on Tesla. I thought that what they were trying to do was that you could buy a Tesla car with Bitcoin, but you needed a certain amount of Bitcoin to be able to like buy and sell. Because obviously, if they're buying with Bitcoin and then they want to refund it, you need to be able to have the capital in Bitcoin to be able to like refund it back. So I thought they were doing it more so that they could open a market in selling with Bitcoin, like with the Cybertruck and everything. But it is also definitely because there is money to be made.
Yeah, like being cynical about it, I think it was very much like, oh, we can buy it now when it's quite cheap, and then we say we're going to allow Teslas to be bought in Bitcoin and basically make a market for the thing we've just bought.
Yeah,
and like, that was my sort of cynical view, and I just think it's sort of it goes in almost the same category as like gold, in that gold is a bit different in that it does have some sort of like fundamental worth and like you can use it for stuff. But gold is just a thing that people trade. Like most people, the vast majority of gold, a lot is used in sort of electronics and things, but the vast majority of it is just a thing that people buy and sell.
Yeah.
And you could like this was sort of my view on it, and I thought it was a bit sort of weird. And my other thing with crypto, sort of people have started to say about it this week, is sort of like the environmental impact of it. And I saw a thing today that said Bitcoin might just Bitcoin uses more electricity than Argentina. Like the amount of like energy it uses.
Yeah.
And like the other stat I've got here from It's a news article from a technology magazine, which says like a payment with Visa, so like using a Visa card online. You go on your website and you put your Visa details in on your card, and Visa does the payment transaction. Uses 0.002 kilowatt hours. The same payment with Bitcoin, because of all the back end stuff that it's doing on the like ledger to blockchain it and the actual mining process to create these. The same payment uses 906 kilowatt hours,
Wow.
which is more than 500,000 times as much energy for a payment.
Yeah. That's insane.
And like, I just don't think, cryptocurrencies I'm not totally against, but Bitcoin in particular, it feels very much like a thing that people are getting behind to make some money in the short term and not really thinking about the bigger picture of it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just me being cynical again.
No, I think that's a good point.
Sorry to jump in on your news like that. Did you have any other?
Not really. I've got one other thing. So I don't really know much about this, but I thought I'd chuck it in. But the first council meeting of the Square Kilometer Array Observatory action plans that will lead to the world's biggest telescope being assembled over the coming decade went ahead, and it's going to be positioned across South Africa and Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So my question really, is this going to kind of like be the new giant radio telescope that we have? Because I thought we were building one on the moon as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is going to be sort of, it gives you a very big baseline to sort of look at stuff. So it'll be very, very sensitive, as I understand it. And it also means that you can, having such a wide, basically aperture means that you can have quite a wide range of frequencies that you can use, which is useful. So it could be possible, later in the article that you've linked, it says sort of range of centimeters to meters range. So it would be possible perhaps to sort of take pictures of the same thing using the same telescope quite rapidly in different frequency bands, which would be quite useful. Particularly sort of space satellites, which are the sort of gold standard for sensitivity because you don't have the atmosphere and things to connect with. Obviously, they are limited in size, which limits your aperture, and they have to have sort of fixed optical elements that you can't easily switch in and out of. You're basically limited to. I think even like the best telescopes will only usually have 3 or 4 frequencies that it can look at, and typically that will be like different kinds of infrared, for example. It's not massively different, but this has got quite a wide range of frequencies that it can use. But yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. And also, I think what's good about it is being so big and spread across different countries means that it will probably create more international collaboration on stuff and sharing of information and science, which is good. But yeah, I'm not massively into astronomy either, so I can't add that much more.
No, that's fair. I was interested. I hadn't really read that much in it, so I wanted to see what you were thinking. But that's pretty much it for my stuff this week. If you've got some more, I think you've got a couple of other things.
Yes, I just added one in late. Sorry about that, but I've got 2 more bits. So we'll start with the smaller one, which was, I think actually it's a bit of older news. I think it first came up about a month ago, but I only came across it now. So this team, it's called the Moonrise Project. I think it caught my eye because we discussed it recently. Was they've managed to create the world's first 3D laser to print stuff out of moon-like regolith in 0 gravity.
Okay.
So what they have basically done is taken, I don't think it's on the moon, but they've taken regolith, so like moon material.
Yeah.
They've got this sort of robotic thing. It looks like maybe like a table on wheels. So a table on wheels with the laser mount in the middle pointing down, so it's able to basically like mount the regolith beneath it. And by mounting it, it's able to obviously then form harder sort of materials out of it. So they've actually managed to sort of create things in zero gravity by 3D printing moon stuff.
That's
So
insane.
this is exactly what we were talking about. I mean, this obviously is an early prototype and isn't going to be, it doesn't look like this thing will be able to build a biodome sort of thing, but it could. This sort of technology is exactly what I think we're going to need to produce moon bases before we get there. I know we discussed before. I don't see us being able to either send people to the moon with something and just live in it straight away, or like send even like prefab components and get them assembled on the moon. You know, like the International Space Station sort of thing. Like send it, put it on the moon, and assemble it there. That I don't see is going to happen because we just don't. There's no way to get large crane stuff together.
Yeah, I was just reading the end of your thing now, and I did not know that the China National Space Administration have got plans to 3D print their base on the moon, and the Russians have got a plan to build 3D structures on the moon as well. And I didn't know that they had their own moon mission to get boots on the moon on 2027. That's insane. It's all kicking off this decade, isn't it?
Yep. And this sort of 3D printing stuff seems to be at the heart of it. All three of, so the China one, the Russia one, and this is an American sort of project. They all seem to be targeting this 3D printing as a way to get initial bases set up quite quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I wonder if that technology will catch on, and our generation in the future and stuff, when we come around to buying houses, we'll be buying 3D printed houses. Or our grandchildren.
Interesting. You might know I'm a bit into sort of like civil infrastructure and things. The channel I follow called B1M, they're like the biggest construction YouTube channel. I think it was in Denmark recently. The first 3D printed house has got sort of like structural approval, so it's been it's been built, it's been signed off, it is habitable. Wow. So the first 3D printed house, fully 3D printed, does exist. It's been done. And it is. The funny thing about it is it looks like a massive tabletop 3D printer. It's this huge like box frame with a massive thing in it that moves around and builds the house.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting technology, and it's going to be pretty cool to see what it does. And then I remind me next week. I did see something today about the Lunar Gateway, about the first sort of plans being signed off for that, and the first I can't remember the company now, but a company has been given the go ahead. They are launching stuff. The first two components of the Lunar Gateway. So remind me to look into that, and we'll talk about that next week. But this week, my last piece was on the Mars missions. So.
Whoop, whoop.
As of now, there are now 2 new probes in orbit around Mars. So yesterday, on Tuesday the 9th, the United Arab Emirates Hope satellite made orbit around Mars. So that's obviously a big step for them. That's their first thing around Mars for the UAE. They are the 5th spacefaring country to do that. So the US, Soviet Union, Europe, and India have got Martian orbiters, and now joined by the UAE. And then just a day later, China joined them as well. So their Tianwen-1 went into orbit around Mars. So lots happening. And then, of course, in just a few weeks, we have the NASA mission, which is going to arrive as well. So it's all getting quite busy up there.
Yeah. It's gonna be awesome. I'm so excited for the NASA one, and not because it's NASA, but because of the little robot drone thing that they've got. I'm unbelievably ready for that. I just want to see it. But no, yeah, it's awesome. I love it. I think it's class. I did watch a bit of the UAE stream, and it was funny. Did you see the visuals? It reminded me of like Cosmos with Neil, when they like walking on like the Mars surface and stuff. It's all holograms and stuff. It was funny.
Yeah, they know how to put on a visual display, don't they?
Yeah.
In Dubai.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Chinese one was also interesting. That looks like it's got some pretty funky science stuff on it. So yeah, I think it's all good.
It's awesome.
On the
When did they get sent?
I don't know. I lose track of these.
I'm trying to think if were we a podcast when they got launched, or
I've got the date. The Chinese one was launched July 23rd, so no.
No. There you go. So that's pretty crazy. Since that's left Earth, the Infinite Void podcast has sprung into existence. But
Actually, I've just read something. The Chinese one does have a rover on it as well.
yeah,
They're going to be putting a rover on Mars, so yeah.
insane.
Been a big week.
It has been a big week. It's been a good week for space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I had, I think, on that stuff.
All right, well, we will wrap it up there then this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up because it always helps us with the YouTube algorithm and stuff. So be nice, everyone. It's 2021. And if you're listening, audio versions on Google, Apple, or Spotify, rate it the best that you can rate it. I don't know what the system's like on Spotify, or even if you can rate on Spotify. But if you can't, just download all the episodes and help us out. It's super beneficial to us. And if you want to drop us an email, you have an episode suggestion or a guest suggestion, or just questions, you can at the Infinite Void podcast at gmail.com. And if you want to follow us on socials and keep up to date with when new episodes drop, which is usually every Friday, you can give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter at Infinite Void Pod. And we've also started an awesome Patreon, which you'll hear the ad for at some point in this episode. But we've basically got 3 tiers, and they range from Discord servers to shout outs to episode suggestions and live Q&As. So if that kind of thing interests you, go and check it out. And then you can hit me up at Jacob E. Carson on Twitter and Instagram, and you can hit Matty up on Twitter at MattyJMP. It was all smooth sailing this week, so that also in itself deserves a thumbs up. And we will catch you in the Infinite Void next week for part 4. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yes, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.